With your feet in the air and your head on the ground, try this trick and spin it, yeah. Your head will collapse, but there's nothing in it, and you'll ask yourself, where is my mind? Where is my mind? With your feet in the air and your head on the ground, try this trick and spin it, yeah. Your head'll collapse, but there's nothing in it, and you'll ask yourself, where is my mind? Where is my mind?
into the intimate. I, your humble and most willing Grand Inquisitor, will be your guide. Who are you? Who am I? What is this? What's an undercard? Tonight, you'll find out. For those of you that are joining us as guests, welcome. I promise you, it's only going to get weirder. For our loving guild members, welcome back. As you all know, it gets weirder and weirder every day. Now, we've been experiencing an interesting phenomenon with this COVID-19. What kind of phenomenon is this? Well, social distancing. I'm distant, you're distant, our guest is distant. You'll meet that guest tonight. In the meantime, we'll share some time together, some loving time together. For our apprentices, we have no new joining members of the guild, which is interesting. Nor have we had anybody apply for journeyman, which is also interesting. Now for our apprentices, and I'm thinking of one in particular who may or may not be watching this, and if he's not watching this, well, I'm very sad. For our apprentices who, let's say, are recently employed, I think that's a good standard. Yes. Maybe they should apply for journeyman. What's a journeyman, you ask? A man who journeys, or a woman who journeys. Moving on to tonight's festivities, I, your humble crypt keeper, would like to introduce our main event speaker for the night. He's an interesting fellow. My understanding is his dad is some kind of a sailor with a very long beard who goes by the name of Pichadil. Also, this guest, this vaunted, skinny, and interesting guest, well, let's just say he works for a company that I also work for, allegedly. Coming to you live from the crib, and I mean it very much from the crib, because tonight's guest looks like I'd say he's about 7 years old. That's a very appropriate assumption. 7 years old. This guest once approached me and the mighty Pichadil, and he told us that he is too smart for the front lines. Now I, as a former, starting to become very former, United States Marine, and the Pichadil, as some guy who sat on a boat and dropped off real warfighters, allegedly, for he was 4 or 5 years, we took a particular interest in this individual who said he was too smart for the front lines, which just may happen to be the title of tonight's talk. Before we move on to that, and I introduce our very interesting guest, he's going to announce something tonight that, if you drop into the comments, will result in a free poster. Now, this poster is going to be very unique. It will be like anything, unlike anything we've ever seen before, quite frankly. Moving on to tonight's speaker, I would like to introduce to you, ladies and gentlemen, the Patsy.
think the nicest thing he said about me there was being skinny, but none of it was quite untrue. So we're going into the talk tonight. I'm going to jump straight into it with Too Smart for the Frontlines, how to use Nmap in World War III. And while that has a lot of words, that has nothing to do with what I'll be actually talking about. Nmap is the bottom line. We're going to be looking at very intro level to setting up to be an advanced user for Nmap, which is going to be our biggest recon tool, I should say most popular. So stepping right into it, who is the Patsy? It's me. I'm Shane, tester, former SOC analyst. I do lockpicking every now and then. You might have seen me in places like D-Sides for the past 2 or 3 years. I have a lockpicking village over there. Fencer, I say we're in FA and rated as both. And I'm a noob, most of all. I think everybody ever giving a talk in the other project said this, and I think it's very much appropriate for me to put it in as well. I'm very green compared to some of the other people that I get the pleasure of working with and getting to meet, hang out with, learn from. And this entire thing is me giving back and hopefully getting someone up to closer to their level.
Screen share.
Yeah.
With your feet in the air and your head on the ground, try this trick and spin, yeah. Your head will collapse, but there's nothing in it, and you'll ask yourself
Something.
Yeah, this really amazing guys about to use what?
Okay, go ahead, just keep trying. Ask it.
All right, is the audio better now? Tried a different approach to that. Got my crack expert tech team reading the comments now. Fixing my awful setup there on my own laptop. My bad. That's on me, guys. Looks like we're getting a thumbs up from a couple. Excellent. All right, so getting back into it, as I was saying, I am a penetration tester. I've been doing work in the cybersecurity field for the past 3 years now, and I rather enjoyed it. There's a lot of things that I picked up, and there's a lot more that I still have to learn. So we're going to go ahead and go over some of the more interesting things that I've discovered in recon and discovering what's out there on the network. Going back to me, real quick, for anybody that minds or cares, my alphabet soup, I do have a couple of certifications. I'm working on some better, more complex, more prestigious ones, but for those that care, that's what I have. What I am not is an expert in all things, or all-knowing, or perfect. I'm also not a veteran of any kind. This is said in just the people that I like and know. So before we get those kinds of comments, I do respect the troops, and I do not think I could cut it as a frontline soldier, Marine, or etc. The more important thing, I think, for you guys is going to be, I am not a lawyer. Anything I tell you may or may not be legal, depending on your state, your country, whatever you may be viewing from. So do take that with a grain of salt. Do not do anything to anybody else's network, regardless of what the circumstance may be, without permission. Throwing that away and jumping right into it. So what is Nmap? Who cares? Nmap is the combination of network mapper. It's a very famous tool that was made by one Gordon Leon, better known as Yodor Veskovich, which I have butchered probably, but that's his handle. It's an information gathering tool that's used to discover what is on a network, what's reachable, what likes to talk back. Why do we care? It's going to be a tool that we can use to figure out what we have and what kind of vulnerabilities may exist. We have a quote here from Sun Tzu. It's, if you know the enemy and know yourself, you need not fear the result of 100 battles. So this tool, for that reason, is a purple team tool. Both red team and blue team can use this, and they should be using it to keep their network secure and keep other networks secure as needed. This guy, Gordon Leon, also has a couple other websites that are very, very nice. You've probably heard of them if you've been in the field. You got seclist.org, sectools.org, and insecure.org. Do check those out after this. And we're going to go through this, getting you guys up from recruit to ready for the front lines, hopefully as a chief Nmapper. So Nmapper recruits, let's start out, get our Nmap downloaded. Very easy to do. That's the website if you haven't already. I'm willing to assume that everybody's done this, and if you haven't, you can pause the video or come back later. It'll be available afterwards. You got your OS, you can do it on Windows, Mac, or Linux. After you've gotten it all set up, your first thing is to figure out what your target is, your scope, what you are waitlisted to play with, what you have a get out of jail free card for. We're not going to touch anything that doesn't belong to us, so we don't have explicit permission to play with. And then we're going to go right into it. So for this target, we're going to use scanme.nmap.org, which, as the name may or may not suggest, means that we're allowed to do whatever we want with it. So jumping in, you've got your tool set up. We're going to consider ourselves apprentices. So we got everything set up. Why do we care? Well, let's take a closer look at the tool. Go ahead and run with that command that we just saw. Go ahead and flip back to that last slide for you guys. Maybe, there it goes, nmap. scanme.nmap.org. And let's see how it runs. So right away we get our starting Nmap version. And what this is doing is it's running through some of the default parameters that we're going to go over to find out what we have available. So on this website that we were targeting, we get our other addresses not scanned. That's the MAC address there, it looks like. X number, or IPv6 stuff. And then the available ports. We got OpenSSH, HTTP, NPing, Echo, and the Elite, the 3.13.37. So fantastic. We just ran Nmap. Cool. And by that we mean what? So let's take a closer look at what we're actually doing here. And we'll explain this as we go. So Nmap has a nice little thing called verbose mode. There's 9 levels total. -4 to 4, although not really because on the documentation it says 3 is the same as 4, but we'll go ahead and run it with that. Nmap.org. Run through, and now we can see what's actually going on here, why we want to care. So the scan first does a ping scan. It takes 0.09 seconds to do for the first host and the only host. Parallel DNS resolution. We got the actual scan, the TCP connect scan that we do. We get all the ports available, what their IP address is for the actual website. Host is up, completed, SYNAC, why it was done, all this other information, and then we get this great little data file on our share Nmap folder. There it goes. Cool. And why do we get this? Well, we can do another flag called reason. So if we go in, type in. Can I make my terminal bigger? That is an excellent question.
Zoom in.
Yeah. See if I can make that a little bit better to view. I just had it. There we go. Lovely. All right, we should be able to see this all now. If you haven't seen what we had before, well, don't worry. We got just more information here, more of the same. So for those of you who have never seen an Nmap scan or what it's supposed to be looking like, this is all the information that it starts with. We get a warning that it first resolves to 2 IP addresses. Do the ping scan. The first one gets 2 ports for 1 total host. All this goes down to giving us that it's open and that we have now 3 ports. Interesting, it's not giving me the 4th. That may be because I was messing with it. There it is. All right, perfect. So the reason flag is probably the most useful flag that we have in Nmap. No matter what we do, we should be using --reason because it'll tell us why exactly each port has come up. So usually it's because we have that SYNAC response, which is going to be a 3-way handshake. Here we go. The reason is SYNAC right here. So what's happening right now is when we find the host through all these methods that I'll explain in a moment with our host discovery, is we have what's called a 3-way handshake, where we'll send a SYN request, we'll get the acknowledgement back, and then we'll do the SYNAC or REST to close it out. This is, I believe, REST for the current one, for the default for a standard user. And what we're doing is basically saying, hello, are you available to listen? The website in back says, yes, I'm available to listen. Are you ready to start talking? And then I'll say, never mind, REST. Change my mind, don't want to talk anymore. So that's the 3-way handshake communication with the SYNAC that we've got going on here. And that's how Nmap knows that the port is open. And for everything that isn't responding at all, we're going to assume that it's filtered. The firewall is saying, hey, these don't exist. Don't even worry about it. We're not going to respond to you. So pro tip, do that every time. And if you forget for whatever reason, and you just don't want to go through it, if it was a very, very long scan, you usually get something like this, read data files from user bin share Nmap. And you'll be able to find some of this, and the other log data will carry a lot of this information with it. So we got that share Nmap. All right, so what's happening here? What it's doing is it's scanning for the top 1,000 ports. We saw that 4 responded, 996 decided that there were no responses. That means there are 996 filtered ports as far as Nmap is considered. Now, you may have gotten something different if you are using one of the older versions of Kali, or if you're just running yourself as root, or using a different kind of program like Windows. We do sudo in that same command. I'll just cheat and go up. I know my password. There we go. We'll get a different kind of scan. And this is supposed to be faster. This is our send stealth scan. but it can sometimes take longer, and the reason for that is slower responses. It likes to have a different max retry time. But this should have been a little bit faster, depending on your network connection. If not, it would have taken much, much longer. Last time I did this, I think it took me like 15 minutes. So here's all the posts, SYNAC, TTL 128, all this down, and then reset. So we actually got 3 ports here that are reporting as closed with this send stealth scan. And we'll go into why that is in just a moment. But there are 2 different types of scans, and running it as root does change the defaults. So deep dive into this TCP connect scan. When we use, and we're going to go ahead and do it right now just for fun. When we use nmap dash lowercase as uppercase t, and then whatever our target is, we can do an IP address, we can do a site range, whatever we want to. It's going to run what's called a TCP connect scan. The rest of the figures will be default. But what that does, and that's going to be the same result as our regular nmap, is it's a less stealthy way of connecting to your connection with that SYN request, SYN ACK, and then ACK response. This is the default on user accounts because the SYN stealth scan and other types of scans require lower level access to the operating system, which will require root privileges. Now, the reason that we'd want to ever do something that's higher bandwidth and less stealthy, and either slower or faster, depending, usually slower, is it's more accurate. We're going to get that response back, and we're going to confirm the connection. So the next one is for that root account is that SYN stealth scan, and that's going to be a little bit sneakier here. So similar to the connect scan, except we don't send that final act, but a REST response instead, which means never mind, we're done. The reason why this is stealthier is older systems won't actually log something if the connection isn't confirmed with that final acknowledgement. Now, newer ones definitely do. And anyone with any kind of monitoring or log digestion is going to detect either kind of Nmap scan. Nmap is kind of old, and the blue teamers have caught on to our ways and our tactics. So we looked at this one and what it was. So if we're going to have our Nmap has a lot more options than just the standard Nmap run against these guys with the verbose and the reasoning. So before we do anything, if you guys are going to run anything more than just a port scan or a ping scan, get permission. I'm not responsible for anything you guys do. There is some stuff that Nmap can do that can take down hosts or do some kind of exploitation. If you want to follow along or if you want way more granular detail, there is the Nmap documentation, nmap.org/book, and you can do the man page for Nmap, which I absolutely recommend doing. For that, you add man Nmap, and then when you're done reading through this, scrolling through, it'll give you pretty much all I'm going to say, but way less detail, way less English, and then hit Q when you're done to return back to your console. So one more set of basics for you guys, and I'm going to run through these without actually describing them, or without actually doing most of them rather. The first one is going to be the lazy version for getting your hosts together. When I want to have my full target list, which is going to be a whole bunch of different IP addresses, a whole bunch of different ranges, depending on what the client has or host names, whatever the case may be. I don't want to type in scanme.nmap.org anymore. So I'm going to go ahead and give me some space. There we go. We'll go ahead and nano, or you can use Vim, whatever you want to use. And we'll create a target list file. And let's make a directory first just to save that in. Nano, and target list. This can be quite a few different things. You can make it .text. You can give it no file extension at all if you want to. And we're just going to say scanme.nmap.org. This is either space or new line separated. It doesn't matter which. Last time I tried it. And so now when I say nmap target list, let me save it. Yep. Nmap IL target list. You can just shift tab complete, and for all of my dozens or hundreds of IPs, it'll run from that list. So make sure I didn't mistype anything, and while that's running, we'll move on to some of the other ones that we're not going to be actively using. We do have the exclude or exclude file, --s exclude to type in right in the terminal what you want to leave out. Exclude file, same thing as what we just did with our include file or IL. And that's going to make it so blacklist these. So if I have like a /16 and the client says, yeah, these 7 throughout it, don't scan those because they're 70 years old and will burn down. You can say exclude file, put each one of those IPs in, and it'll skip those and go through the rest of the /16. There's 2 different types of randomize, and people do get them confused. It's kind of entertaining. -IR, don't touch unless you're doing something like research for the public internet. It'll choose random IPs without your input. If you want to randomize the order you go in for all of these, you're going to do randomize hosts, -- randomize hosts right there. List scan is going to be -L, SL, -N, and your targets. That's going to just verify everything without doing any further. It's the stealthiest version to see what's up and what's down. We have our output formats, which are going to be your normal XML, script kiddie, and the greppable. Script kiddie, obviously the best format. So here we have that, what I just did with the regular. We put it into OS while we wait. The rest of these are pretty straightforward. Greppable is single line, so you can grep it. Excuse me, search it very quickly. XML for databases. Normal, which is going to be basically this output right here that we're looking at. And then if we want to do this, we'll say -OS file name. And it'll make that for us while we do it. There's also the -OA if you want all 3 of the real versions, the normal, the XML, and the greppable. And that's just for different formats for you guys to do. Makes it easier to read. It makes it much easier for scripting later on. We got -D for debugging, which will give you even more. It's the only thing further detailed than the -- reason. Lost my place again. Fantastic. All right, --open, show only the open ports. Don't show me any of the closed or the filtered. If we want to discontinue or pause a scan, we can --resume from a file name, and that'll continue an aborted scan. -R for reverse DNS against all hosts, even the down ones, because sometimes they don't respond to ping. And -F to go sonic fast. And that's going to be, I'll go over in more detail what that is when we talk about optimizing our scans. But those are the basics of Nmap. You know enough to get started. You know enough to figure out what is on your home network. Maybe check out some of your CTFs if you're playing along. And we can start looking real quick. We have our kitty file. Let's go ahead and cat that. Just take a look at what it looks like. It's just late speak. A lot of people get really excited about that. Don't ever pay attention to it. Don't use it. So -SL, we mentioned that before, is going to be our list scan. And this is going to reverse DNS for our host names. Good and stealthy because it's the least amount of contact with the actual host themselves. Especially if we want to use a recursive DNS server, we can go hit this and discover whether or not a host is up without actually touching it. Hopefully. So let's take a look at what that looks like while I describe -SN is for disable port scanning. A step less stealthy. It's just going to do an ICMP ping scan really quick. And then -PN is going to assume that all hosts are live. And we're going to go straight into service discovery. Excellent. So -L for a quick scan. Done one IP address, 0 hosts up. Not the most accurate. It's only probably going to work on our local network. So if I wanted to do my local Windows host, that'd probably be better. So if you're on an internal network, you want to go through, look at local DNS records, that would be the way to do it. There we go. So for advanced host discovery, despite RFC 1122 requirements, some sysadmins are turning off ICMP echo requests, or responses rather, for the exact reason of what we're doing here. If I send a ping scan to, say, Google, just to see if it's available, it's going to echo back and say, hey, yes, I'm here. Which is great if we want to look for all the things on our target network, if we're hackers or some kind of malicious user. So when those are turned off, despite whatever kind of RFC requirements there are, we can use different types of ping probes. And this is done with -SN -capital P and then another P. If we remember, whoop, that's the wrong way. Going back, our -SN is just disable port scanning. And when we do that, we have a few different ways. We have our SYN ping scan, which we did before, but this way we can designate it at certain ports. We can do our ACK ping, which is going to be the same as that ST, and that's going to be directed at different ports. And for this one, so with our SYN stealth scan, we're not expecting to send the ACK request back. With we're doing the ping scan, saying, hello, I'm here, SYN request, receiving the acknowledgement, and then saying rest or not responding at all, letting it hang. With our ping ACK scan, we're sending the acknowledgement right away, and that should send us back a rest saying, we didn't request anything, don't talk to us, the RST. So that can't necessarily tell if, perfect. We also have our UDP ping scan, which is going to be for especially useful for ports 53 and 161. UDP, people think it's send, and you never get a request back, but there are some situations in which UDP port will send some information just to let you know that it is listening, especially for things like that need to have a structure and know that there is a connection and order. So we also have our 3 specialty ping types for echo, timestamp, and address marker queries. Our protocol ping, which looks for IP protocol, if I remember correctly. Our ping scan for ARP scans, which goes over the LAN and is usually more accurate, and it uses ARP as to reach pings out. You can't really close down ARP in an internal network without closing everything out. So this is usually the ideal way to try and find if hosts are actually alive, if you're on the internal. Then we also have our default ping scan PS80443. We saw that above. That's our SYN scan. Yes, and then the PE, PS 443, 80, and -PP for root. These are going to be your default scans. This is what's going on in the background. We can also change the data length for these packets. Sometimes most of the time when we send these ping packets or ICMP packets, it's sending a 0-byte file. We can change this because that's not normally what it looks like, to 32 bytes to look more like Windows pings, or 56 to look like Linux. So here's some of the most effective hosts found by probe according to the Nmap documentation. You guys can take a look at that, pause it, take a screenshot, because we don't want to do all of these for every port every time. It's not as useful. But if we're looking for hosts, this is usually what works for the grand majority of people. And then best host discovery combination for these probes in order from what Nmap's research has done. Excellent. So we got host discovery down, and now we can start, now that we know what hosts are there, if we're smart, we can take that greppable output file, grep a whole bunch of hosts out of it, make a different host list that's much more accurate, and stop scanning all of those that we know are down. And this can take a few tries, especially if we're sure that there's more on there. If a client says, yeah, I have like 300 hosts, and you're getting 10 to respond that are all printers, there's probably something else going on there, and you want to try different responses, see if you can get around a firewall IDS. We'll go into more in depth with that in a minute. But once we have that target list and we can cut everything out, we can look at port scans. So these are basically, if host discovery is finding out what houses are on your block, port scan is looking at what windows and doors they have. What are the different services opening out into the network? So there are a bunch of different responses that we can have for Nmap. We saw open and closed. We saw filtered. I don't think we saw unfiltered. I can look back in a second. We have open or filtered if we're not sure, and closed and or filtered. And that's only for the idle scan. Now, open or filtered, and I don't think I'm going to get that here with our designated host. That's gross. Looking at that script kiddie stuff. So, yep, we got all open for these. And then for our stealth scan, we got a few closed. Now, if we don't receive any kind of response, Nmap can assume in most cases that it's going to be filtered, that the firewall received it and it just dropped the request. For a host that's active, that doesn't send or that does send a response. I'm sorry, we did get a whole bunch of filtered. Right there, but it's not listing specifically what these 996 are, thankfully. It's doing show open by default. Right, so if we don't know if it's filtered or open, just because it doesn't send a request or a response for that specific port or type of scan we're doing, that's the response we'll get. And then with the idle scan, it can't tell the difference between closed or filtered. So that's when we would get that response. And we'll go into idle scan in a second as well. More basics though for now for port scanning. Once we do our connect types, some of these have default, or most of these have default port scanners if we don't specifically say -SN. Oh. Of course, these are all scan types, so I'm a bit ahead in my, that line shouldn't be there, but I'm a bit ahead. That's all right, we're gonna go more into detail into the scan types now, I guess. So we got our SF, SN, and SX, which is our fin, null, and the XMIS scan types. These don't work great for Windows, but a lot of, we can't find these Linux hosts. They're not responding or we're not getting what we want from them. These scans work pretty well, especially for older systems. AxScan we looked at, we can use it to find stateful file rules, can't distinguish open and closed ports. Our Windows scan, similar to ACK, but it can find open closed ports in specific cases. The Maymound scan, which is used for firewall evading. Our zombie scan, the idle scan, which is the stealthiest, and it's kind of slow and complex. And we got our protocol scan and our bound scan. This is said to be deprecated, and it's said to be patched out of pretty much every FTP protocol or service there is. But for our bound scan, I don't know how many of you have seen a fully updated printer in your lifetime, but they're kind of rare, and most printers do show some kind of FTP service. So if you can bounce FTP requests off of an open FTP connection to a printer, you can start nmapping from that. And in a lot of cases, printers are whitelisted through the firewall to go to CFO's office, CEO's office, making sure that they all can print what they need to and talk to whatever you want to or they want to. So now we're looking at ports. We can do searching by ports by number or by protocol. Some ports use, or some services use more than one port for the same service. So if we want to do that, we can do the formats like -P SSH, which uses 22 by default. If we wanted to do the number, it's just -P 22. We can do multiple. These, the command line, are comma separated without the space. So you can do dash P 22, comma 25, and that'll only scan those 2 ports. We can do ranges, which are inclusive, so 80 through 85. We have our assuming range. So if we just do dash 100 or dash 500, we'll assume we start at the beginning and go to that point. Or if we do 500 by every 60,000 and end in a dash, there should be a dash. I will go ahead and run that. Actually, we'll say nmap dash P 65,532 dash first targets. Technical difficulties there. Too many 5s. Maybe. Yes. We only look at those first 4 ports. None of them were open. They were all filtered. So that's the way you can do it if you're kind of lazy or if you don't want to type out 65,535 every time. You can just hit that dash. The 1 saves you an extra keystroke, but whatever. And dash P dash will assume that you want to scan literally everything. It'll do every port 1 through 65,535. And then you can also do wildcards for your services. So if I want to do HTTP and HTTPS, I do HTTP star. Anything starting with HTTP will be scanned. Timing. So sometimes our computers are a little slower, or our networks are slower, or we just want to speed things up. We can change that in here with our T0, T5 templates. The most common that I've seen is T4. T0 and T5 can both break things depending on your network. T5 overloads and floods the network. T0 can cause something similar to like a slow LoRa's attack, where it's just so slow sending out probes that it creates a denial of service. So you want to be careful with the 2 extremes. But if you want to try and avoid detection, T1, T2, if you want to hurry up and get the scan done for all your /16s that you have to get done by the end of the week, T4, maybe T5. Now these are presets for a whole bunch of other really, really cool settings that I'm going to go to in a bit in depth here. And they're kind of intimidating at first, especially if you're brand new to this. But they're so easy to know and so easy to just work with. You got our min RTT timeout, the max, and then the initial. And that's when I send my SYN request or whatever kind of probe it is. I'm like, hey, are you open? How long am I going to wait for that? So we'll do our min and then a number, and that'll tell me how long exactly to wait, usually in milliseconds, if I'm not mistaken. So if I do min RTT timeout 1000, that'll be 1 second to wait. We got our host timeout, which when to give up on the host themselves. So for host discovery, same thing. We have our min rate, our max rate, and that's going to be how many probes we send out at once. Are we going to attack all 65,000 ports and services, or are we just going to do 2 or 3 at a time? Slowing that down can make you a little bit stealthier, especially if you have people monitoring the network. How many times do you want to retry if something fails or just doesn't get a response? Min host group, max host group, which is the number of hosts that you're going to test at once. Min parallelism, max parallelism, which is how many ports do you want running across all hosts at once? And then, of course, our scan delay and max scan delay, which grows. And this is why I said stealth scans. I haven't had this happen yet with a TCP Connect scan. But our stealth scan can slow itself down if it's not getting the request it's expecting. And that just increases the time so much. But for one host, it took me like 20, 30 minutes. So I like to change that anytime I do a stealth scan on my own. Say max delay 6 or 5. If you're not responding to me with that, your network's either really bad or I'm kind of nervous about what you got. I don't really care if you're responding or not. I'm going to assume that you're down. So a quick view of what we got on our FTP bounce is what it looks like if you fail it. But this is really as easy as it is to run. This is not me. This is from the actual Nmap website. moving on from there. If that works, you'll just get the scan working as it should. So this can all get very slow, as I've been talking about at length. My biggest problem with Nmap is how much time it can take to actually get through a network of a decent size, because there are so many ways to verify and so many services to look for in ports. If you want that complete view, you're going to have to look through all of them. But, and this is a mistake that I definitely made when I first started out, is you don't have to do everything at once. Definitely start with a fast scan and try to resist running multiple scans at once. Especially knock out your fast scan, do your -SN or -SN, that should be a dash, and your top ports, which is going to be your top 100 or top whatever percent. Dash top ports is 3,000, 3,300 TCP, 15,000 UDP. Your top 1,000 or top 100 ports, which is a default with that -F mode we talked about, that fast mode, is 78% effective. So these percentages that we're getting, this is based on Nmap's research of how much of the internet is using these services. I think number 1 and 2 are 8443. The other 3 are going to be like 22, 25, and there's another one. It probably will show up. I think I added a screenshot. But these are your most common ports, and if you have something on a network, you're probably going to find these. You're probably not going to find something running on port 64,400. Unless someone's doing something really specific or they set a custom port, that port isn't going to be on your network at all. So you want to focus on what you can, get the easy stuff out of the way, see if there's RDP on the network, see what you can find, if there's SSH, see if you can grab banners for that, find out what's on your network, and then move on and get that full complete scan that you want or your clients want or your boss wants, whoever is asking you to do this. You can do -N to skip the reverse DNS, which is really useful when you're doing assume all hosts are live, which is -PN, which we can do after our host discovery. So we know all these hosts are here, -PN, we know they're here. That skips our ping scans, ping host discovery. And doing -PN will make you do a -R in your entire host list. And if you don't know that everything is live, you want to just scan the /24 as is with your host discovery, that's going to do a reverse DNS lookup on all of them. So -N, especially if you're doing -PN, do UDP in a separate scan, just because it needs different special settings. Don't run more than one Nmap resist. Do the quick scan -F, run through it, and then Nmap for your normal scan will estimate 21 minutes per host by the number of hosts that are actually online. That's for a normal scan. I don't think that's for the fast one at all. Definitely not. So I got this in the way. I don't know if you guys can see that, but I can fix that. We also have our hosts and ports. Now let's look at our the services that are actually running on them. So we talk about different kinds of things, like port 22 is SSH. That's not always the case. We can have different services running on them. We can also have ports that don't have any known services. So when we do this, we want to figure out all the services we can that are running on them and their versioning, which in some cases is more important. So if I see, oh, SQL is open, what version of SQL? Can I grab that banner? SSH, can I grab the banner, see if there's a vulnerable version of SSH? -SV is our detect for services. Nmap uses a rarity to determine which ones it's going to do, because it doesn't want to do all of them, and it doesn't want to give you a minimum. So the rarity is how useful these probes are. The higher the rarity, the more you're going to get out of it. The default is 7. They call that intensity on the actual program. If you want to change that, if you want to change it from the default of 7, which you absolutely can if you think that there's some kind of unique program or they're running something different, you do -- version intensity, and 0 through 9 is your intensity. You can also do -light, -version -light, which will set it to 2, and -version -all, which does everything. Even for soft matches, it's going to send you the additional probes to get that service identified. Okay. So that's the overview, real quick, over what these services are. There are a whole bunch of different ones. And then we can go into the NSE scripts in a minute, which will help more with that, depending on what you're trying to do. So OS detection can also identify operating systems over Nmap, which is very useful for setting up our exploits or figuring out why you have 8 more devices on your network than you expected. Well, there's a switch and there's a smart refrigerator, the smart bidet, whatever you guys have on your network. You can see, oh, well, it's Linux, so it's probably something like this. Oh, it's Windows, that might be a host that I don't know about. Oh, there's these cell phones. So if you can identify these different types of operating systems, that can be helpful to whatever it is you're trying to do. It's really as easy as typing in -O, and we'll see if we can figure that out from here. And let's go ahead and run a couple of these now. So we're going to do -IL, of course, target list. Leave that there. We're going to do our -SV, see what services are running on these ports that we discovered. And then we'll throw in the -O just for fun. But we're not going to leave it at while I talk about that, let's run this. We're not going to leave it at just the -O though. Because while it does work, and it will give you, if it can identify it 100%, the actual operating system, it does have kind of a low tolerance. If it can't identify it, it's going to be like, sorry, I have no idea what this is. No OS matches. But here's the fingerprint. Now, sometimes the really salty networking guys can look at that and be like, oh, that's Windows 10 running this version. I'm not at that level yet. So I'll do OSS -OS scan -limit, which will require, that one won't work, -OS scan guess or -fuzzy. And that's going to give the best guess for this. So we have our services here. We got open SSH. Breaking my own rule already. Talking too much, not thinking. We have our SSH, which is running open SSH version 6.6.1v1. Ubuntu Linux. We got our Apache server running. nping echo. And then it didn't show any services again, but that port's kind of intermittent right now, so I don't know what's going on with that. Might be my network. If we wanted to do, let's go ahead and skip we know the host is live, so we can do -pn, -o, -os scan, guess, or you could do -fuzzy if you wanted to. Double dash right there. Take a second to look at that and run. Must be root. Ucali is killing me. And let that run. While we're doing that, I'll go ahead and talk about the operating scan limit. This runs really the best when you have both open and closed ports responding. So if you want to limit, especially on large internal networks, what it is that you want to be looking for operating systems, you don't want to waste too much time, you can do -OS scan limit with it. And that'll only be if there's an open and a closed port. You still need to use with both of these -O or -A, which will do operating system identification. You can't just run these by themselves. So we should have that in a minute with the reasoning as to why. And we'll be able to move on to our fancy scripts and the more advanced stuff. So final steps becoming proficient, the Nmap scripting language, which is the NSE. Final legal warning, if you don't own it, don't do it. And this is the really important one for it, because the scripts are actually what start interacting with services. They can, by design, denial of service, certain exploits. You can make your own scripts for these to do different things. So if you don't know what you're doing, or if you don't own anything, don't ever run these scripts on something that you don't have permission to. This is pretty interesting because we didn't get this before. So we're doing the SYN stealth scan with this. As you can see, time elapsed, 42 seconds. And it will tell you exactly, if you want to hit enter, it'll refresh it every time. Here's my progress done, estimated time to completion, It'll be 1900, which is 7 p.m. In the 12-hour clock, 2 minutes remaining. And that's usually fairly accurate. I can refresh that, 49, 47. So it's running pretty well. Depending on if the host responds. There's only one host on that, so we know it's going to respond. It's responding. So for scripts, dash little s capital C, those are going to be for your default scripts if you just run it as is. There's a good collection of them that we'll look at as soon as we're done here. We got the dash script, which you can do a specific script with. You can do dash script equals default to get the exact same thing as the dash sc argument, or you can do different categories, run all from a directory. There's different expressions you can do, logical expressions, and I think, yeah, I do give examples of those. And those are really, really fun to play with. If for nothing else, then you get to use computer logic, which I don't get to do too often when I'm making stuff, unless I'm programming, but I don't know, it's just another, I don't get to use it in a tool very often. So all scripts end in .nsc as their file name. And if you use the directory option real quick, that'll just go through all of the .nscs in your folder. I like to take a whole bunch of the ones that I know that I like. I'll throw them in my pen test folder or my client name folder, whatever it is I want to call it. And I'll run this, and then I'll go through so I don't have to type out each and every one every time because I'm kind of lazy. We also have our dash script all. If you want to do the hack the planet, run all of the scripts and see what happens. Usually don't. Depending on your client, I very rarely get things where they're like, yeah, do not specifically denial of service my servers or website or anything. Please don't. I need to be able to have business continuity. There are a couple of situations which this is very useful. If you're running your own local version of, say, a web app, someone says, here's the source code, run it, do whatever you can do it. Great. Denial of service your own source code that's not a production environment. Do not do dash all to production stuff. There's a database of the different types of categories, but you can look at, they have safe, default, I think I wrote some more. Default or safe. You can do by service, so HTTP, dash, you can do wildcard. There's a whole bunch of different ones. You can find these on the website itself or in this file in scripts, scripts DB. And that's going to be that right there. If you want to add arguments universally, you can do dash script dash args. And that's going to be things like what kind of rate you want to run it at. So if you want to do a brute force attack, maybe you want to run it slower so you don't get detected and blocked right away by an IDS. There's a whole bunch of different arguments, and it all depends on which script. You can look at the script itself. If you do dash script dash help right there, I did add that. And type in the specific script, or if you want to type in that category, and we'll do safe in a second here just to take a look at what it looks like. That'll tell us what exactly needs, what kind of arguments it can take, what it does, what it looks like when it gives you the output. So check on this real quick. All right, so we're at 75%, 15 seconds left to go. So I'm going to go ahead and touch real quickly on the args file, because again, for the lazy, Nmap is really, really convenient, where you can take all of these arguments, and if you do the same kind of scan over and over, trying to build your tastes, whatever it is you like to search for when you attack a network, you can build out all these arguments in a file as well and add that as an argument. Just use the file, run it, dash script args file. Way more efficient in what you're trying to do. So that's SYN scanning for our, we did sudo, so it automatically, as you can see, switched over to our SYN stealth scan. And this is supposed to be the faster of the two scans, but on web, it seems to like to slow me down here. So do be careful of that. Norpisha deal there. Talking to my work chat. let's see, we have a -- script updated. You can update things for, make sure you have the latest and greatest scripts that you're running on your network. That's going to be update DB. That's another typo real quick. Quarantine has me working alone, so I had to proofread this, sitting there talking to myself. I could have done a video chat, but I did not. -- script default safe. Those are all the different types we talked about. We can also use inclusive logic, what I was talking about before with those expressions. If we do the double quotes, -- script default and or, you can start adding things and deciding what you want to do. This is an inclusive or. So if I say -- script default or safe, that's going to run all the scripts that are default, safe, or both. Oops, this has stopped it responding. I can probably do this again. If I wanted to make this go faster, what I should have done at the beginning when I saw that, run that TCP connect scan. Because I was getting hung up at the 75% mark. args file is the most efficient. You can use that in either comma or new line separated. That's not space separated. And the script arguments look like, there we go, user equals foo pass equals whatever it may be. So for this one, you use foo for the pass, blank for the password, foo for the username. And that's for something like a brute force script where it's like, okay, test all these default credentials for SSH or for my VoIP phone, printers, routers, whatever it may be. You can run these pretty efficiently. Lovely. So something may have gotten mad at me here. Let's go ahead and do it like this. Yeah, scanme.nmap.org was that? The exciting part of the live demo. We can do different paths for different types of arguments. We'll come back to this in a minute. I don't want to spend too much time waiting for my slides to work with me. Now, the great thing about this is the language is actually really easy to use. It's based off of Lua, which is pretty well documented. And Nmap has their own documentations as well. I have the two links here right in front of you. This is basically what the finger NSE script looks like. So this is similar to probably, if not exactly, what's going to look like for the help. No, it's not. But to show you the output, what the script is supposed to look like, what it's supposed to show you, get that login time for this one, and show that it's looking for an exact port, actions to take for it. It's very easy to use coding language. So if you want to make your own scripts, if you have an idea and you're just not finding it there, you can work with this. I'm not a coder at all. I can make some things to make my work life easier. I can script. I'm not a software engineer. And I find this myself very easy to get through. It's PowerShell or Bash scripting. It all kind of flows together at the end. So the basic syntax and everything is at these places. There we go. See, and that's why I don't like running as root anymore. But we got that synac response. So here's all of our versioning. OSS scan results may be unreliable because we could not find at least one open and one closed port, as we talked about. But the device type, web access, we have the WAP right there. Running Actinotic embedded Linux 2.4.x or 3.x, something along these lines. And then here's our fingerprint. Now, if there's an incorrect result, or let's see. Yep, if there's an incorrect result, we have this link right here at the bottom. Sorry, I was looking at that last one. Where we can submit an error. And we just copy and paste this fingerprint right here. And we say, hey, this is wrong. can you guys go ahead and add a update for this one? It's Linux version, whatever. So here's a much longer one, I believe for some kind of Windows host, if I'm not mistaken. I could be absolutely wrong. But if I know the exact version number of the operating system, especially if I own it, and I want Nmap to get better, I can go to nmap.org/submit, give them this fingerprint, and they'll be able to make the tool better in a later update. Okay, so we got the script run through, perfect. So now we have all these great scripts. Let's go ahead and run one real quick. So let's look at nmap-sc, no, -script -help, and let's look at the defaults. So here we have a list of our default scripts that it's going to be running. There's quite a bit of them. We're not going to run through all of them, but let's take a look at some of the. I wonder if they have an RDP by default. Yes. All right. So we have our RDP NTLM info, which is in 3 different categories. We have the default, the discovery, and the safe. You can look through all of these and see the different categories that each one is in. If you want to do discovery scripts, run all the discovery. If you want to run all of these, go for it. But this one, here's a website for it. Script enumerates information from remote RDP services with CRED SSP and LA authentication enabled. So you go through all of these, look through them. Some of them give more information than others. Some of them are way more useful than others. This is probably one of my favorites. This is SMB2 security mode. And it tells you what kind of security mode SMB2 is running. And it also tells you if SMB signing is on, which is excellent if you want to run a responder like an expert hacker. SMB security mode. Yeah, this is a much more useful one. SMB2 security mode is great. This is the one that gets me the most results. I have this all scripted out so that I hit run and it gives me a whole network file full of all the hosts that I can start running responder on. So you can do that kind of thing with all of these. There's a few of them that I have. SSLv2 is great. If you want to start intercepting traffic, trying to decrypt it. Different information, ubiquity discovery, find ubiquity devices, all kinds of tools, X11 access. So these are all the default. If the verbosity is greater than 1, okay, that's just for that script. Perfect. So we can do that for all. And if we wanted to run, let's just do safe, just to be nice to our friends over there. We're going to do -bn, yeah, let's do that. ST. It's probably going to ask me for root privileges, but I don't like to give that out unless I have to. -IL. No, target list. And am I forgetting anything? Yes. --reason and -vddv, because why not? Here we go. These are all the scripts running. Now, some of these are stopping. And this is a good thing to note right now. No interface supplied. Use -e. So there are some of these arguments that need to be done. So if I wanted to do that, and I'm thinking better of that. If I wanted to, let's assume that it's ETH0. I know for a fact it isn't because I'm on the Wi-Fi. Oh, no, I'm on a VM. It definitely is. Hopefully. We'll see. Let's take a look. I keep forgetting because I know they changed it. Okay, so now this is gone. And these different arguments for each one of these scripts, and I can work through these and develop that script arguments list that I wanted before. And most of these are just not privileged. Here we go. Please specify showdown IP key with this argument. So I'd say --script-arg equal showdown API key. I have the exact format written down here. I have to look every time I do this. This is why I love my little argument files, because I don't ever have to do this again after I've gotten it once. Yep. -args, and then it would be the API key equals blank, whatever it may be. I'm not going to put my API key here for obvious reasons, but fantastic time. So now it's gotten all those scans out of the way. We've got our DNS resolution. And I actually could have done a dash, I believe it's capital R. Make sure that I didn't do that reverse our DNS lookup, just because I didn't need to do it. Because I know that the host is up. But that's fine. So now we're running, remember our default intensity is at 7. So it's only running those there. Certain probes, if I'm not mistaken. You must specify. So I'm going to keep getting these errors, and I can fill out my argument file, but for this VM, I don't have it. Just because I want to make sure I had everything fresh and everything worked with our new Kali. Skip ahead. That's fine. So while that runs, we can skip into some of these evasion tactics because, like I said, Nmap is kind of old, and we do have some of the people on the blue team developing ways to catch us or stop us outright, which is fairly annoying. But cat and mouse game, we're always figuring out ways to try and get around it. Some of the similar ones or easier ones that is just misconfigured. The firewall, let's say, is blocking all ICMP from this port, or rather, all data from this port. If we are, am I skipping ahead? I am. Okay. So firewalls can send forged RSC packets to make us think that we have closed ports when really they're open. There's a few things that we can do to counter this. I apologize, I jumped ahead quite a bit, but we can determine if a firewall is stateful or stateless. Things like that SA, that enumeration that we found with the ACK. If all ports return filtered, you found a firewall that's stateless. If they're open-closed ports and return that you had from a previous one, and they start returning unfiltered, that's going to be a stateful firewall, which we can use for things like firewall spoofing or things like that. So different attacks that we can use. We can use source port manipulation to kind of hide it. So for the port-based firewall rules, we're going to start scanning certain things. We can do source port -G88 and stop using our default port and see if that gets around it. This is especially useful if they're doing IP blacklisting or port blacklisting instead of whitelisting, where they just leave everything open by default and close the ones that they don't like. Or they leave the default configs that do this. Another forgotten misconfiguration is IPv6. You see this at every other security talk, where getting around something just involves turning on the IPv6 option, and it works fairly often. To do that, you just run nmap -6 and then whatever, and it'll include the IPv6 options. So I'm always surprised. I always forget it, but I'm always surprised at how much more information I start getting when I start doing that. Just because, like the I'm just like the sysadmins, I forget about it. There's also a few other things we can do where we can make ourselves stop looking like Nmap, because Nmap does have kind of a unique signature. It does the same thing, a known process. So we can do -F, which will fragment the packets that we start sending out, which can fool some intrusion prevention systems or detection systems. This won't work with like things like version detection, because it does require on the TCP stack. But for things like, hey, is this port open or closed, or does this host exist? That's going to help you get that extra information. We're not always going to get every bit of intel on every host. We're not going to find every open port. We're not going to find every active host. Unfortunately, that's not necessarily always possible, especially when Blue Team does their job right and they segment things off and everything else. But the more we can get, the closer we are to that exploit and the figuring out that weakness that we're looking for, the weakest link in the chain. We also have, for people who do MAC address whitelisting, very, very clever technique until you realize that you can tell things that you are that MAC address. So this is really tricky. You have to do --spoof -MAC and a number. You can do your full MAC address, or you can just type in 0 and it'll give you a random one. Or if you're really clever, and this is my favorite way to do it, is you can give a specific MAC address for either a device that's on the network and see if it fools it, or you can type in like Cisco and it'll choose a Cisco MAC address on its own. And I don't think I got a screenshot of that, so we're going to go ahead and take a look at what that looks like as soon as we're done here. Getting hung up on one of these scripts. But that one's a fun one to do. And it doesn't always work because not everybody does MAC address filtering. But it does, especially for the ones that have no other way. I know VoIP phones have a lot of problem connecting to certain things. So if you spoof the MAC of a VoIP phone, you have all the access that VoIP phone does. Some really, the older printers that can't do other types of authentication, they also do MAC address filtering. That's actually another way you can get around 802.11x is the port security. Is if you see a VoIP phone, plug into that VoIP phone's port and just use its MAC address. That's more for physical tests, and then FTP bouncing, because again, these devices need access to the entire network. Things like printers, the CEO and the CFO, they all need to use the printer. So you just bounce your signals off of that, and the printer is usually a pretty trusted device. Just because if you start turning things off, you're going to make someone mad. So, can we pause sharing for just a moment? Yeah. Cool. That out. Lovely. All right, we can resume now. Excellent. Okay. So we can also do, there's a few other techniques that we can use to kind of get around and mess with the blue teamers. Dash randomize host. If we're going through in order, like, oh, .0, .1, .0, .2, it's going to be like, okay, that's kind of fishy. That's someone who's digesting logs properly and alerting on them. They're going to catch that and they're going to be like, okay, this needs to stop. So we want to be stealthy here. We can do a randomize host. Slowing things down is always a good idea. Blasting the network with stuff, that always shows a red flag. Like, hey, someone's doing something that we don't normally see, and it's all coming from this one host. Why? So turning things down to -T1 or setting your own personalized settings, that can make it a lot more hard to pick up on what you're doing. You can get clever and try sliding time scale. Nmap doesn't actually have a way to do this on its own, but you can do something where, you send out blast 14 requests, pause, do like 7 requests over the course of 5 seconds, do another blast of 14, mix things up, do that sliding time. And things like snort won't be able to catch that. There's a whole bunch of different things that require you to do regular intervals. So we can get around those. That's fantastic. Again, there is no way to do that default in Nmap yet. That is a coming feature that I'm very excited for, but there are ways to do that, and I might post some code into the Undercroft chat later for that. OS detection and some scripts are loud, but you don't always have to do that. So if you're worried about getting caught, if you do have a blue team that knows what they're doing and is monitoring, you can turn off a lot of these things. Don't scan every port. Don't look for operating systems. Use Wireshark or something similar and just listen more. There's also something you can do, and this is more to mess with the team, the blue team, than actually evading them. This is port scan spoofing, where you change your source IP address with that -S parameter. And that's making me say, if I know the CEO's computer and I want to get the blue team in trouble, I'm going to run it -S CEO's computer, and all these Nmap scans are going to go to the CEO's computer. It's going to make him look really suspicious. So if he gets blocked, he loses access. Obviously, don't do this to a client that doesn't give you the green light for it. But if you can get the blue team to turn off their computer, it's going to make them a lot more hesitant to stop you in the future, because they're going to get a few nasty emails and their phone calls. So here's all of our scripts, all these beautiful, well, not that one, but not found, who is name, script execution, user agent tester. So we got all this information. Oh, look at that. It's likely vulnerable to the slow loris attack, which we mentioned earlier, where we just start communication with a host, but we send byte by byte, just byte, and then it's listening, waiting for us to continue the response. And while that host is sitting there, we start another connection. We start doing the same thing. That's a whole nother talk. But like I said, I think this helps me set up where, what kind of things do I want to do? Google Analytics, a whole bunch of different. So I don't think that Google Analytics was actually anything useful, but there is a whole lot of information that you can get. Also, it requires the interface parameter, which we saw earlier, -e. You won't get any of the results from doing this. This is just to make someone else look guilty. Some 4D chess moves, trying to make the blue team react in a way that you want them to. But it's an entertaining thing to do. Lovely. So scripting, all of this can be scripted out. I have a couple of different bash scripts now where it's just different types of environments that I want to scan for and figure out what's on the network. Some things are on all of them, like those SMB security modes. Those are on everything, just because everything has a Windows host. And I want to make sure that I catch everything with SMB signing off. Just because if that is a vulnerability, everybody should know about that and they should stop having that. SMB v1 detection, things like that. But I can do all of these services and I can actually run them in order with a bash script. So if I want to do host discovery, save hosts, grep host IPs, create a new host list, use this host list. There's so many things that you can do to sync this all together and automate a large portion of what you're trying to do. You create yourself a whole bunch of vulnerability reports, a whole bunch of service reports, and then look through later, or run these overnight and come back and do manual stuff during the day. These aren't really quiet things to do. These are only for networks that I know where the IT team is 2 guys that are kind of pulling their hair out and just trying to get better. These are pretty common. So for this kind of stuff, run it, let it go, come back, help them out, tell them where they can improve. But if you want to make really good use of your time, catch up on some of your coursework for different certifications you're doing, put some of this stuff together for yourself. You can also do, if you're doing this on your own network, stuff like cron jobs. So every 2 weeks, run an Nmap scan, see if there's any rogue access devices, rogue access points rather, or devices that aren't supposed to be on your computer. You can do a compare each of these results that get outputted every month. Just see like, okay, well, this is where we were at last month, this is where we're at this month, put them all in a database, a whole bunch of cool stuff that you can do with this from both teams. I already said bash scripting. You can also set it to email yourself. You set up your own SMTP server. So if you're running a scan, and I don't do this just because I don't get email notifications to my phone for my work. But if you're running a scan and you're like, hey, email me when we're done with the Nmap, just say, hey, let's continue the pen test. You can do that. So you don't have to wait the 45 minutes or the 4 days for whatever Nmap scan is going on. You can just come check on it when it's done. And for the networks that are several /16s or the ones that decide that they want to use the /8, for whatever reason, those are really, really helpful. Is to not sit there and babysit it or check it every day or hour or whatever you're required to do. So now I'm going to focus a lot more on the blue team stuff because if you really understand this, you want to help out. The entire point of what we do is help people to secure their networks. So here's how you can make my life difficult and the other people on my team, make us really pull our hair out. First thing you can do is use this and find vulnerabilities and fix them yourselves before I ever touch your network. If you go through and you're like, oh, SMB sign-in is off on everything, I'm going to turn it on. Or, oh, everything is running SSL v2, let's disable that. If you do all that kind of stuff before I get to go to your network, that's going to make my job a lot harder. And the same with any kind of person who's doing this maliciously. Block with firewall. blocking any kind of ports that don't need explicit access, especially on the external. If you can do this on the internal, fantastic. I don't know too many companies that have that kind of manpower. But if you can, right, whitelisting is always better than blacklisting, which is where you turn off everything and then you turn it on as you need it, versus blacklisting where everything is on and you turn it off based on what you're nervous about. The other thing you do is set up some kind of SIEM, some kind of alarm ingester. And that doesn't make you secure on its own necessarily. But if you can get alerts when someone's doing something like an Nmap scan and be like, huh, that's not supposed to happen. Let's go ahead and unplug that computer from the network. Whatever you need to do. Catch this stuff early on before we get past our recon phase, and it's going to make the testing stop in some cases. So you can mess with us too, actually. We were talking about doing the IP spoofing. You guys can use things like, don't use port 22 for SSH. You can set any service to any port on most systems. And that can really mess it. So if I'm sitting there trying to figure out why I can't get an SSH banner on port 22, and it's not even running SSH, it's going to annoy me. I'm going to bang my head against the table for a few minutes. You can do something called port knocking, which is where ports are closed to on a firewall until it gets a specific sequence, and then it opens up and then you communicate. That takes some configuring, but that works both for red team and blue team, really, if you want to set up like a callback and you don't want to get caught. Keep the port closed until you send that exact sequence, and then you can allow communication. Honeypots and honeynets, these are kind of controversial because the entire point is to set up something that's deliberately vulnerable to be like, hey, come on and get me. And if an attacker can jump from your honeypot into your main production network, you set yourself up for failure there. So if you're smart about it, honeypots and honeynets can slow people down. This isn't so much for pen testers or red team testers, because if I can go from your corporate network to your honeynet, you're probably doing it wrong. There's a whole bunch of conversation to have there. I fall in the middle. I like them and I don't like them. Tar pits are similar, and those are things designed to deliberately slow down your attacker. So if someone's trying to do our SynStealth scanner, keep it communicating. Give us our own version of a denial of service attack. Send us 1 byte at a time of information for that one host. And we're going to have to dig through logs and figure out why it's so difficult for us to scan this. And then hopefully have some kind of log calling back being like, hey, somebody's scanning me. Probably do something about that. You can also do OS spoofing, and I actually have it here. This host is responding as a Sega Dreamcast, which I think is great. If you can hook up different things and set it up, there's a whole lot of documentation on the different things you can make it look like. If you don't need this information, if your systems don't depend on it, if it's not some kind of sensitive network, go ahead and mess with attackers with this. I'm trying to hack a Sega Dreamcast. I'm going to be looking at all of the wrong CVEs if I eventually figure it out. All Nmap does is talks to things and works with the information that hosts willingly give it. I'm not doing anything crazy for the most part when I'm finding a host or I'm finding an open port. I'm saying knock knock, and the port is saying who's there. So if you can say who's there with the wrong accent, it's a pretty fun thing to do. And then for those who really want to get into that, Nmap, the top tier of it, it is a free open source software tool. I love these. This is the creator's field at nmap.org. That's his email. He's got the BGP, GBG, which we learned about in a couple talks ago. On his website, if you want that public key. If you have some kind of script that you're like, hey, this is really, really cool. I made this. Put it on the Nmap so I don't ever have to transfer it from my database to database, or I can download it or I can share it with everybody in the world. Or, hey, I've got this update. Here's that timing thing that you wanted. I programmed it. Go ahead and implement it however you want to. Take a look at it. Free and open source software, contribute. That's pretty much as advanced as you can get with the tool, is if you know it well enough to improve upon it. And I do highly recommend that for anybody who can. This isn't at all. Let's go ahead and check my time here real quick. I do have another half an hour, but I'm pretty much through. So I'll pose something for the chat in just a moment here. These are some of the initial tools that you can use because we don't always catch everything. If we get a URL name, URL for instance, we might need to do some more digging, try and figure out what kind of subnets there might be or different IP addresses that this would result to. A whole bunch of other stuff we can do. So traceroute, dig, host, whois, going from bottom to top there for some reason. Zmap does have a GUI for Windows. I don't like it. It is deprecated from what I've heard. I haven't actually seen that yet, but it's essentially the same thing. All the things you learned here, you can apply to the Zmap GUI. There's just 2 search bars on top, one for the host, one for your arguments. All the same stuff, all the same tool, just with more visuals. And then you have Zmap is a totally different tool, but it can go through the entire internet insanely quickly. It's more for web external scanning, and it's a pretty fun tool to use. It uses a lot of the same stuff. The documentation is pretty good on it. There's quite a few videos on it. I may give a talk on that later if there's a high demand, or someone else can hopefully take that over if they have way more experience. But and then just to end it off, a huge thanks to the Undercroft. These guys are great. They're letting a noob apprentice get his foot in the door, talking, give his own technical talks to other noobs. Hopefully, some of the more advanced people got something out of this. I tried to touch quite a bit on the scripting engine, but when I ran through it at home, I ran out of time, so I talked a little faster. Scripting, very easy, especially if you have already coded before, if you know what you want to do. But yeah, thank you to the Undercroft. Thank you to all the staff that's still hosting us, still keeping it going during the plague here, COVID-19. And if you guys want more information, you want to join the guild, you want to talk to all these incredible smart people, you have their website right there, theundercroft.net. Sign up, join, come to the talks, give your talks, share your information. That's all I have. Thanks, everybody.
Okay, Patsy, thank you very much for your talk. We're going to go ahead and move into the Q&A section of the evening. And before we begin, why don't you go ahead and tell everybody who's watching right now, how did you get your nickname, Patsy? Patsy, can you hear me? All right, folks, we are experiencing technical difficulties again. Hang on one sec.
No, but we'll discuss it in here.
Okay. All right. So the first question that was asked was by DC813, and that's a good old Crisis. And he wants to know, let me find it real quick. What flags do you find that you most commonly use on your pen tests?
Flags?
Yes.
In one context, like things that I find, or
No, as in like the options.
the arguments, yeah.
Yes.
So, which ones do I use most often? You can't really, every network is different, and I really hate that answer. But it's true. -pn is really, really helpful because whenever I forget it, it just really makes everything a lot longer. After you've done your host discovery and do a good job of it, but create your own like specialized host list for especially internal networks, where you're like, these are the internal IP addresses that actually exist, not the whole /16, and then -pn. Don't ever assume otherwise, but yeah. So -pn in the right circumstance, turning off DNS resolution, which I think was -r. I don't want to say that incorrectly, but not doing that every time because that's another host discovery thing, especially with -A, which is aggressive mode that does a lot of these things automatically. If you don't specifically turn that off, it's going to give you a rough time.
Okay. Good old RJ45. He is asking why don't you recommend Windows for running Nmap?
Why don't I?
Why don't you?
I don't recommend Windows in general. That's a personal vendetta. But to give a serious answer, it's the same thing. It's the same tool. It runs as local administrator, if I remember correctly. But yeah, I don't say don't use the Windows Nmap. I just say don't use the Windows. Also on that last question, --reason, -verbose, especially --reason every time, no matter what you do.
Okay. Trying to find a question from RJ here in between all of his stupid names.
Al has one.
Thank you guys for the memes.
RJ has a question. What are your recommended defenses for one's organization against outsiders who like to run Nmap? How do you spoof and how do you stop Nmap?
How do you spoof and stop? So we went through that. I don't know if that's an older slide if I answered that question with some of the blue team stuff that I was talking about. But port knocking, turning off ports that you don't need. Really, though, if you have stuff that you have to have open to the internet, you're not going to stop Nmappers. People looking around. It's not necessarily illegal. Depending where you are in the U.S., you can look at what services are available. That's how the internet works. It's not necessarily a threat in itself. It's reconnaissance. So while you can do a lot of those steps that we went over, and I think these slides will be available to members, the talk will also be posted on YouTube. Follow those and block IPs that are a little too shady.
From Pisha. Is there a benefit to using Zmap versus command line?
So, yeah, let me go ahead and make sure I'm not showing anything too sensitive. Yay. All right. See if we can get a Google images of this real quick. No, so if you go ahead and download Zmap, if you have a Windows system, play with it. I don't like it, but it does offer you different looks. It can give you like a network graph. I haven't seen it work properly before, especially because most networks are flat anyways. It can give you like a big outlook, little green dots, like all these are open, but I like grep more anyway. I can grep open for whatever ports. All the command line stuff just works faster and I can script it out. So it's personal preference.
Okay. Our beloved CEO is asking where should he send the 4 girls that think you're handsome? Moving on. Thank you to our chief executive officer.
My girlfriend is listening, so I'm in trouble now. Thanks, guys.
Owl, buddy, good old Jesse. He's asking, could you explain how Zmap might help, or what are your thoughts on it?
Yeah. So Zmap is a GUI. And like I said, just some more visual. If you like those, the graphic user interfaces, where you can see, like these are the green dots. You can map things out. That's where it would come in handy. You can't control F into it. You can save the files with a different. It's a little save button on it, or it'll warn you to close every time you close. It's a little bit more convenient, I guess, for running multiple scans. But like I said, it slows it down a lot. It's not designed to run multiple Nmap instances. It's designed to do all of its processes in parallel as fast as it can. So again, personal preference. If you really want to use Nmap GUI, go ahead.
Okay. Zoran, calling all the way from Serbia, is asking if running on Windows, does -SN or any ping options behave differently than Linux?
So that actually may be one, because Windows does like to mess with how you communicate. Thank you for bringing that up, Zoran. Yes, Windows is by design more and less secure, depending how you look at it, with the tools that it runs. So you may see some kind of interruptions with that, with the stealth scanning. I don't really use it on Windows often, But I will add an addendum to the PowerPoint if I see that. I'll go and play with that later.
Okay. This one's from Crisis masquerading as DC813. Does Patsy want to mention, do you want to speak about the DB Nmap MSF integration?
DB, Nmap, and MSF.
Yeah,
so,
the Nmap integration and the framework.
Yep. Yeah, so you can create databases that go into Metasploit. I was going to suggest that to Zoran because we do have a talk coming up on Metasploit. It's going to be awesome. I'm very, very excited for it. Everybody's got to be there. And he can probably touch much more on that. But you can take some of your Nmap scan results, plug them directly into Metasploit and see how they work.
Okay. This one's from me. Why don't you tell everybody how you got the nickname Patsy?
Oh, yeah. I thought everybody at the Undercraft at least knew.
Yeah.
No, let's hear it.
Okay. So I was a young, fresh introductory apprentice into the Undercraft, and my boss actually is talking to some, what would we call him? The count.
The count?
Yeah.
The count is the count.
No, like X.
The count is the count.
Okay. The count, who's the
count is
spook.
a
I don't know if I'd say that. The count is like Jason Bourne, but wears a larger T-shirt.
I like that. Yeah. Okay. So he sent me to Jason Bourne, and he's like, "Hey, man, I got just the guy for you," because Jason Bourne was trying to send my boss on this cool mission, just some country that has questionable use of their running water. And I was like, "Yeah, what's the thing? I love that idea." Not knowing at all what it was or what I was supposed to be doing. So yeah, he looks at my boss and he goes, "Did you send this little kid to me to be a Patsy? Is this your Patsy?" And yeah, that's how I got the name. It just kind of stuck. He still hasn't given me the employment contract, but I'll let you guys know if I go to said country.
That's actually RJ's got one more.
Okay.
What is your favorite work of fiction featuring Nmap?
Favorite work of fiction featuring Nmap? I actually don't know too many off the top of my head, and it depends what you mean by favorite work of fiction, like on what context. Everybody says Mr. Robot, and that's because Mr. Robot did get a lot of things right. So that's if anybody has better things. I'm not really a Pulp Fiction guy. Anybody has any better suggestions, books, movies? I might mention Nmap. Please post them in the chat before that closes. Yeah.
Cool. All right. I think.
From RJ, is it true that Nmap outputs different stuff if not run as sudo or admin?
Is it true that it runs different stuff as if it's not sudo or admin? For those of you who might not have heard it, I don't know how the audio is coming from that end of the room. Yes, as we demonstrated before, if you run just the generic Nmap, it's going to run your TCP Connect scan because your SynStealth scan requires you to have lower level connection to the OS. Now, whether or not that's the case with Windows, again, because of the connection features, I don't know. And again, I'm going to test that out and see what happens, just out of my own curiosity, probably on one of the DV Labs web app or server or something. So.
Okay, we'll give it another, we're out of questions now. We'll give it another couple seconds. Okay. Also, for anybody that can hear me, we're going to, at random, pick somebody from the comments, and they are going to get a unique poster for participating in the talk. We'll pull from both the Slack channel. Actually, you know what? Yeah, we'll pull both from the Slack channel, events channel, and then we'll also pull from the YouTube comments as well if we can still get access to those. But
and then we'll announce it next week.
Yeah, we'll announce it next week during the talk. But Patsy, it's looking like. Oh wait, AK. He just asked, is there a way to change the default NSE user agent?
So Nmap is fully open source, and that's one of the great things. It's got configuration files, and you can change anything about it that you want to. How to do that specifically, I'm not sure where you'd have to go. I'm pretty sure it's, I can get that back to you guys if you want, but if you look into the documentation on nmap.org, book. It's a free online book. The entire documentation for Nmap is there. And you can work into it and really that's that high level, you know what you're doing and you're going to make the software your own, start your own GitHub branch, share it with the Undercroft.
Great. So Kobe did our talk last week. He said Trinity used Nmap and Matrix Reloaded.
They
That's
did.
a good
Matrix Reloaded.
Yeah,
That's a
Matrix,
good-
that was actually the first movie. I think Hackers did it.
Yeah, hackers. That was a good poll. So, cool. I think that's it for the questions.
Okay, so, Patsy, we wanted to, as a thank you, this will now be, for those of you that can see it, in Patsy's future. Whenever the guild meets, everybody see it? Yeah, good. Whenever the guild meets again, like actually physically, instead of being a bunch of freaking nerds on Slack, Patsy, the way we do this in the Navy and the Marine Corps, which, by the way, Peach, I heard that Marine Corps comment. You can go do some unspeakable acts to yourself there, sir. You pick 2 people within the guild to essentially pin you on. So go. You have some time to think who you want to pin you on. But yeah, congrats, bud.
Awesome.
Hang on to these. You're still an apprentice. You're still a puke piece of crap, but there's brighter skies ahead. Congrats, bud.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Not a problem.
All right.
All right. Cool. Good job, man.